Maybe I'm crazy, maybe I'm not.
Today, we were doing something a little different on the podcast than we normally do. We're going to scratch Wood and Quit It and High Key Low Key and Culture Report because it's been an insane, stressful week for everybody around the country, really around the world, because there's protests going on around the world. But I don't know. I just felt like we hadn't had a conversation like as a podcast about everything that was going on. Individually, we've all talked, but like as a podcast to share with each other and have a real conversation about, you know, what we're all feeling and all going through individually. And I also feel like each of us has a real passion for the community and for the culture, and may have some suggestions for people or things that we've talked to people about individually in our own personal lives about how to handle everything that's going on and what they can do to help. So I'll just start. This has been an incredibly triggering, very sad, heavy week for me. I probably cried every day of the week. It's impossible to not feel, at least for me, this like deep sense of just emptiness and despair watching that video of George Floyd with the police officer. It's like harrowing to hear people pleading and screaming at the police officer to just move his knee off of his neck, and that would have saved his life. And they're just all standing there completely devoid of human decency, not even enough to just nudge him to move his knee to save his life. And this like constant, it's like a nightmare just watching that video and imagining that being my brother or my nephew or my cousin or just a friend, an uncle, like under that cop's knee, and like what I would be going through right now and how I would handle that and how like you would move forward as a human or as a family. And we've seen so many videos of this and so many hashtags, and there's been so many conversations, and there's been protests, and it feels like every couple years, you know, there's Ferguson and there's Baltimore, and now there's protests all over the world for George. And I don't know if it's the combination of the pandemic and just kind of what felt like a just back-to-back pummeling of Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor, and now George Floyd, and everyone is at the height of tension that I can really remember maybe in my lifetime other than 9/11, which weirdly was a huge unifier in our country. This has been a huge divider, it feels like. And while I am encouraged in some ways to see so many white people and so many non-Black people open up to want to talk about what's happening and ask how they can help and share things on social media and stand in solidarity and go out and protest, and just an overall feeling of we see you and see what you're saying and see the pain. And maybe we don't know how to help, but we feel like we should help, or at the very least we should have the conversation. That part is encouraging. What is extremely discouraging, other than, of course, the trauma of watching yet another Black man murdered by a white police officer, is the reaction that we're all having now to deal with from the rioters and the looters. And I want to be very clear, I do not support rioting and looting, and I don't think it's right to burn down someone's business, and I don't think it's right to destroy property. But I also, more overwhelmingly and most importantly, care about the emotions and the loss of life. So to talk about the looting and the rioting, to me, in the way that, in the experience that I'm having those conversations or seeing those conversations being had, completely diminishes what the actual issue is. Yeah. I don't care, and I want to be very clear, I don't care at all about a brick building, at all. Do I want someone to lose their business? Of course not. Do I have friends who have small businesses? Of course. Do I have Black friends who have small businesses? Of course. Do I want to see them lose their business? Do I want to see it burn to the ground? No. But what I do care about is that we continue to focus on the actual conversation, which is police brutality and racial injustice in this country. And when I'm constantly hearing, well, the looting is wrong, no one is on the same page about looting being wrong or right. Everyone agrees that we don't want to destroy property. Everyone agrees it distracts from the conversation. Everyone agrees that's not right. What everyone doesn't agree on is how to move forward and how to enact change so that people aren't continuing to be murdered and taken advantage of in the Black community in this country. So what I have to say is 99.9% of my energy is directed towards people no longer losing their life, Black people no longer losing their life at the hands of white police officers, and 0.01% is reserved for that brick and mortar. That, by the way, has insurance. I don't want to diminish anyone losing their property or their business. It's horrible, it's wrong, and for that matter, most of the rioters and looters that I'm seeing are not Black people. So what I would really like people to do is remove the conversation from protesting and rioting and looting and focus on the overwhelmingly peaceful protests and what they are protesting and what this is all about. So the first thing that you say when you talk about how you feel about everything that's going on is, well, the looting is really wrong and these people are wrong and they need to stop burning down businesses. If that's the first thing that you say, you are the problem. You are the problem. And I don't care if that sounds harsh or unapologetic, because it's just the truth. The first thing that you should say is how terrible it is that the Black community has had to deal with these injustices for as long as they have. How horrible it is that George Floyd will never go home to his family because a cop couldn't be bothered to move his knee off of his neck. How horrible it is what happened to Breonna Taylor. How horrible it is that some white supremacists chased down Ahmaud Arbery and shot him in the street. That's how horrible all of those things are. And I'm devastated that this has been happening. And also, I'd really like for them to stop, for some people to stop looting and rioting. If you don't look at it that way, you're missing everything that's happening, and you are in fact the problem. And that's how I feel right now.
People are tired. People are fed up. People are tired of having to scream and yell for some basic things that are provided to Americans. We shouldn't have to yell and scream after Ahmaud Arbery is murdered for those guys to be arrested. But it took that for them to be arrested. We shouldn't have to yell and scream for George Floyd's murder to be arrested. But it's taken that, and it's taken these protests for the remaining officers to be arrested. And we're still waiting. Like, it's ridiculous that we are still waiting. People are fed up. People are frustrated. And they don't have an outlet for that frustration because it's a cycle. It keeps happening. We're tired of having to repeat these people's names. The sad thing is that there's probably another Breonna Taylor out there right now. It's just a matter of time before we know her name and we hashtag her name. Or there's another George Floyd who it just hasn't happened yet. And people are pissed. And this is what happens.
I saw this video of Jane Elliott, and she was in a room full of white people, and she asked, if you want to be treated the way society treats Black people, stand up. And then she ended up repeating the question because no one stood up. And then she said, so since nobody stood up, that tells me that you know what's happening. You don't want what's happening to you. So why are you allowing it to happen to other people? And I feel like that I'm really sick and tired of having this conversation over and over and over again. As a Black woman with 3 brothers, youngest one being 14, my mom has to tell my brother what to do at 14 when a cop pulls him over. And if you're not Black, you can say, oh, I understand, or you may not understand, but you will never know what it feels like to be Black. So if you don't understand, if you don't see it, you gotta do research. You can't just learn this stuff in school because they're not really teaching where they should be. Do research and you can see it's happening. It's happening right in front of our faces. And this man was killed like in front of all these people. Look at what's happening. And then when we talk about this rioting and looting, look, when people protest, rioting and looting, it happens. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, it happens. this is what happens when people protest. People protest during games. So there's always going to be bad people in instances. So you should not be focused on why people are rioting and looting. You're, like, as you would say, you're missing it. Do the research, show compassion, try to understand what it's like to be Black in America, because if you don't see the problem with it, I don't know what else to say. It's disheartening. It's so, like, I don't. Sorry.
Okay. Take your time.
I just want to say that it's not a white versus Black. It's everyone. It's everyone versus racist. And unless you speak up, because if you're not saying anything, you're part of the problem. Like, you have to speak up. You have to, because clearly a moment of silence isn't enough. Kneeling isn't enough. Protesting isn't enough. So if all that's not enough, then what do we need to do to be heard? Because everything we've done, no one's hearing us. But no one can tell us how to rightfully express ourselves. What would you like us to do?
I mean, whatever you want to do is what you should be able to do. That's the right that I have. Anytime anything happens, I can do whatever I want as a reaction, and no one really says boo. And so you should be granted that same right. I think, thinking back to something that Joy mentioned, saying that you're missing the point if you don't understand why there's looting that's happening. Like, it's a very clear scenario. If you think about, it already being a pretty sketchy economy under President Trump, you think about COVID-19 happening, you think of all the extra issues that Black people have to deal with and minorities have to deal with in this country just to get the same opportunities that I have. Like, if you can't understand that that's how someone gets to looting, or, all the other ways that people could want to loot for their own benefit, all these other things, you're missing the point. It's like something we were talking about before we started this, Zoom record officially. All lives do matter, but they can't all matter until Black lives matter. And so saying right now, all lives matter, like, yeah, that's a given, but it's not, that standard isn't being met for everyone. So that's where saying Black Lives Matter is important, because it distinguishes between, this notion that all of us feel, right, that everyone's equal, that everyone deserves an equal shot, but somehow that's not translating for opportunities for everyone. So it's about connecting those dots. And just speaking from my own experience, I want to say thank you to Joy, thank you to you guys, thank you to Brandon for letting me in the room. Being the only white guy in a room is awesome. And I don't know if I would have necessarily gotten the opportunity to find that out and to be able to try to understand. I'm never going to be able to understand. I'm never going to be able to walk in the shoes of someone who looks different than me, is a different sex, a different orientation, all that stuff. But trying to understand is the least I can do. It's the least I can do. So just one other thing, and I actually want to get your guys' thoughts on this. One other thing that I've sort of learned of late in my sort of progression from, growing up a privileged person that doesn't necessarily understand to trying to understand, is it's not about speaking for anyone. It's not about having anyone's back, but just standing next to and just being there. And I know that there's like a shady white element of the protest that, we got Umbrella Man with his hammer wiling out. Like, there's no justification for that, but I am happy to see white people stepping into this melee and standing with, not trying to speak for or protect or, any of that stuff, but just being there with people of color and just trying to stand with them. So like how do you guys, how do other people who look like me be supportive? I know that's a tough question, and it really shouldn't be up to you to fix this, because it's, as Gavin Newsom said, this is our problem. It's not Black people's problem. It's the institution's problem. It's our problem. Like, how can we, without, the whatever the version of mansplaining, like, partake and stand with you without taking away from the message and the importance of it?
Well, I think and thanks for saying all that, Heller. I think there's not to, categorize white people. And, my mother is white, and I have white people in my family. and I have white friends and obviously white coworkers. And I've had conversations with everyone about this. And to me, there's just two, but to simplify it, and there's obviously gray areas, but to simplify it, to me, there are two categories of white people right now. White people who are trying, right? And then the white people who are standing in this space of, you know, trying to defend Trump, or trying to defend who they voted for, or feeling like, again, this is an attack on all police and an attack on America. And, you know, they are also the ones who are, like you said, agitating violence and agitating looting and all those things. So to focus on, I want to focus on the latter group as well, but to focus on what you asked, to me, I'm a solution-oriented person, as you guys know. But something goes wrong, I'm like, great, something went wrong, but how are we gonna fix it? Like, I don't want to keep having the same conversation about what's wrong. And that's why so many people are so frustrated, and as Donnie said, so tired, because we're having the same conversations over and over and over and over again. And these are human lives that are being lost. It's not, you know, a computer glitch that we're trying to fix. So the first thing to me, if you want to be helpful, is, you know, people are quick to be like, oh, I have a black friends, you know, I don't see color, I have black friends. Well, this is a good time to humble yourself and reach out to those black friends. Check on them, just ask, are you okay? How are you dealing with everything? How do you feel? And show that you care about their mental and emotional health during a very stressful, triggering time. That's a very easy thing to do. It doesn't require a lot of energy. You've been doing that throughout this entire coronavirus, hopefully, if you're a normal person. So that's first and foremost.
Yep.
B, ask them, how can you help? What can you do? Can you donate somewhere? Can you, you know, file a petition or sign something? Can I call a congressman? Like, is there something that you know of that I can do to spend my time and energy to help? But the most important thing to me that I think people have to do, to me, this is the grassroots element of, I'm not a racist, or I don't see color, or I truly want to help. The most important thing to me that you can do is have conversations with your white friends and your white family who say off-color jokes, or who make comments that are ridiculous, or say things that, like, you're like, if my black friend was here right now, or my black boyfriend or black girlfriend or my black coworker, I would feel uncomfortable with what they're saying. Well, if that's the case, you can tell them, I don't feel comfortable with what you're saying. And I'm not trying to be a revolutionary. I'm just saying what you're saying is wrong and it's racist. And you have to be able to stand up to those people in your life, because guess what? They're in your life. So that's a reflection on you. And that's how it spreads. All this change and all this movement and money and protests and all that is awesome, and it's great, and it's super important. But to me, as important as all of that is those heart-to-heart conversations with your crazy uncle who is running around, and I'm just uncle, aunt, whatever, whoever this person is in your life, right?
An older relative, for sure.
Or your friends, like, or the people that you hang out with who are only focusing on the looting, or who are saying, you know, well, you know, maybe he was a drug addict, or whatever it is that they're saying. You need to check them. And then if you continue to notice that those people continue to act that same way after you check them, then you need to search as to why those people are in your life. Now, I say that about family like it's very easy. Look, I'm cut different. I understand that. Not everybody is willing to go hard at their family if they don't feel comfortable with something. But this is just that time. If you really care, if you really want to make a difference, you have to have those hard conversations, which is why I keep saying that on social media. It's time to have those hard conversations. It's time that when you sit down at the dinner table and you guys are talking about what's going on in the world, stand up for it. Repeat what your black friend told you. You know, I talked to my friend today and she's hurting. She's upset. She's not okay. She has to tell her brother that when you get pulled over, this is how you have to act. She's afraid that when she drives down the street in the car with her family, something could happen to her or him. That's what you have to tell them. And if that doesn't register in them, that's your work to do. Because Black people can't do that. We're not going to be in those rooms. We're not going to have those conversations with your family. And clearly all the yelling and screaming and protesting and pleading is not getting to them. So to me, that's the most important thing.
time to risk those relationships, it sounds like. But that,
Yes.
I mean, but you should be willing to risk a relationship with someone who has shitty old views.
Yeah, I mean, Joy, I'm with you 100%. I think the biggest thing for me is just having the white friends that I have, not even white, just, non-Black friends reach out and say, man, what's going on is crazy. How are you holding up? How are you doing? That to me is huge, because some people won't even say anything. They act like it doesn't exist. So I think acknowledging it, having those conversations and educating yourself. Don't look to the Black friend to give you all the information, tell you what's going on. Like, no, but see it for yourself. That way you understand what's going on, and you can talk to, like you said, your uncles, your aunts who may not be educated. So you have to be willing to have those uncomfortable conversations. I mean, you just have to. That's the only way for people to understand like what's really happening.
I would put a small qualifier on the reaching out to your Black friends. Reach out to the Black friends who you have reached out to like recently or about something else that you like. Don't reach out to that Black friend that you haven't talked to in years.
Right. Yeah.
And then like say like, hey, I'm thinking about you, like that. I've had a few instances where that's happened to me, and like I appreciate it, but at the same time, it's like it makes me feel a way that I honestly can't articulate right now. Because it's like you're it's coming from the right place, but it's still an example of what's wrong in a way.
Right.
But I can't like fully like.
Well, it makes you feel. I mean, I'm not putting words in your mouth, but I can imagine that it makes you kind of feel like a token.
Yeah, it does.
Situation. And so, I mean, so to me, I feel like there is not a responsibility, because as Heather said, it's not Black people's job to teach white people how to act. But again, I'm a realist. So what I don't like about our society in the cancel culture world that we live in is that people do make mistakes, and people do come from places where they aren't educated and they didn't grow up around diversity. And that's not an excuse to behave that way. However, if someone is trying to learn, let's let them learn. We don't have to hold their hands and show them the way, but let's try to find a way to all communicate so that we can learn, right? Like we can learn about each other. And I know for me, it's something I have to work on because I am extremely hostile right now. So I am like barking at everybody and not speaking in a a very understanding way. And I kind of a few times have had to step back, like, is this helping? Like, yes, I'm angry and I have a right to be angry, and that's fair, and I'm hurting and I hurt for others as well. But I do want, if someone is saying, I want to learn, for them to learn. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, it does.
It does. And I want to just clarify, I'm not saying just anybody who's non-Black reach out to me, but if I have a really close, like a best friend, because there's an instance where having a best friend who's a white person who hasn't said anything.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be like, it'll make you question. Like, I understand, especially when, when this person, for example, this person's a nurse. When this pandemic happens, this person at the front lines, I'm reaching out to you saying, hey, how are you doing? How are you holding up? So in that case, I'm giving this for this particular situation. It's like, if I'm reaching out to you, I would like it to be done to me, especially somebody I'm like super tight with. But yeah, I mean, I understand that not everyone, it can be a little weird if you have random people reach out saying, hey, I know what you're going through. Like, it's like, no, you don't.
Yeah.
Like, so I just want to just clarify that.
Yeah. And also, I mean, yes, it should be people you know and have relationships with. Like, don't go, mass texting all the Black people in your phone asking for tips.
Right.
Not what I'm suggesting at all.
I feel like I got caught up in a few of those mass texts, and it's
don't mass text.
No, don't. This is not a good time for mass texting at all.
I don't know if it ever is. I think I have a thought on this, which is that, as a white person trying to learn and trying to understand, and trying to not bring sadness, like reminders of sadness to your door, like some of those people that are texting you out the blue, basically because you're their Black friend and in your mind, like, instead of doing that, like that's your instinct. That's wanting to help. That's a good start. But really genuinely think about treat, like, not just believing that everyone is equal, but that actually treating everyone equally is a way to avoid sort of stepping in it on the way. You know, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, but if you don't want to step in it, like, really genuinely be self-aware and think about, like, if everyone actually is equal, which I believe and everyone says they believe, that I know, right? Your actions have to represent that. And so, you know, obviously, you know, if you know that your friend who's a nurse is going through it, that's a good time to check in with them. But just hollering out of nowhere, cause like that, like that's you know, I'm not racist. I have black friends, which is really just an admission that you know a bunch of racist people.
Right. And that's like, so to me, I'm saying, and I want to reiterate that because I don't want to have a bunch of white people texting random black people to understand what's going on. What I'm saying is, if you have a friend who doesn't look like you, they're going through a lot right now. So I think the word to best describe what I'm trying to say is what T said earlier, which is have some compassion. And we don't live in compassionate times.
Not at all.
I'm not the softest of humans. And I have to remind myself, as I said earlier, like, that I need to take a deep breath sometimes and understand, like, what's actually being helpful. Even though I have a right to yell and I have a right to be upset, I want to be solution oriented as well. And being compassionate for what everyone is going through, and specifically what the Black community is going through, and recognizing your privilege wherever you have it, is super important. And that is really, like, to me, what is going to make this move forward positively, and what's going to actually enact change. Because everyone is, you know, like today is Blackout Tuesday, everyone is posting and sharing and standing in solidarity. And then everyone started getting mad because the hashtag is burying all of the images, and then that became a problem. And then it's like, okay, should you be posting because you're just posting and then they're not doing anything else? And it's like, okay, like, let's all just focus for a second.
Right.
Yeah.
Of course, we want everyone to stand in solidarity with Black people right now. That is important. And I don't think that, you know, there's a lot of different conversations about how this whole blackout thing started and how it's evolved, as most social media things do. I don't think it's helpful to be critical of people who are trying.
Right.
In fact, you know that they are not really trying because you know them personally and you know that it's bullshit. But people are trying. So that's step one. Now let's help them. Okay, thank you for posting that. Now, can you please take some action other than the 30 seconds it took you to post a black square to go and do these things like what T posted? Let's help Black-owned businesses. Let's, you know, sign some things and get some change actually moving. Actually do what you say you care about. So take the next step. And that, to me, is like what has to happen now. Like, we're protesting, forget the looting, I don't even want to talk about it anymore. We're protesting, which is overwhelmingly what's happening around the world. Everyone is recognizing that there needs to be changes. Everyone is getting involved. I'm seeing people post Black Lives Matter, like corporate companies, and I am in shock that these companies are all of a sudden not afraid to post Black Lives Matter. Whereas a year ago, it was like, just stay away from that. Now they're like, whatever, Black Lives Matter. Because everyone's realizing that's not a statement that should be controversial. It's just facts. And now, thanks to cell phone video, we have the evidence right there. You can't deny it. There were people there. There were multiple camera views. You saw the cops lied about what happened. You saw that the cops lied about what actually killed him. Everything is there in plain sight. You can't deny it. So now let's figure out what the next step is.
Yeah, I think it's really heartening to see that, and it sucks that this is a heartening thing, but it's heartening to see that there's commercial value in believing the right thing. And so I think that that's important to remember, because every click that we make, everything we buy, every website we go to is in some way monitored, right? They mine that information from us, every email we send. They mine that information from us to figure out what we want to buy. and then sell it to us. So if if you control your messaging and everything you're saying fits a worldview where people really are given equal opportunity, then the stuff you buy and the company selling to you are going to have to acknowledge that in the way that they try to sell you that bullshit they're trying to sell you. So I think that's super. The two things that are heartening for me, obviously, I'm relatively new to the level of anguish that we're all feeling right now. But the two things that are heartening to me are that, and also, you're seeing a break in the police lines. Normally police support even the worst among them. And I think, you're seeing, it's just a couple places, of course the guy in Flint has empathy. He's going through it too. And in Houston, Texas as well. But you're seeing this, does it feel different to you guys? This moment, because of, like you said, the three killings happening, also Karen in Central Park going after, a gentleman who could not seem nicer or less threatening than a bird watching bro. Like, so do you guys feel progress at all in this moment, or is it still just the usual?
I think this time it's different. I feel like the thing with George Floyd was like the straw that broke the camel's back. It's like we saw this officer have his knee on his neck for 8 minutes, and I believe it was 46 seconds.
No emotion.
With his hands in his pocket. So to me, like, you actually see that. So I feel like that, yeah, I mean, people were outraged because this has happened before, obviously, but it keeps happening. The way it happened is just like, like I said, we saw it. It's like it's there, it's happening, it's murder.
Yeah, I feel like this feels bigger than some of the past protests that we've had, like recently with Ferguson and in Baltimore. And it might be circumstances like the perfect storm with people are unemployed, people aren't working, people have the time, and like you said, T, people saw it and people are pissed. So people are going out there and they're keeping this story in the news. Like, George Floyd's murder is not getting lost in the news cycle. It's staying because it's relevant. And I feel like you said, Heller, you do see breaks in police officers interacting with protesters and kneeling with them and talking to them. That does feel different. At the same time, I hate to see some of the interactions with the police officers where it feels like they're combatants. You got cruisers in New York running over protesters and police officers like shooting at the media. Like, it feels like there's more love, but at the same time there's a lot more anger and a lot more hate. And you want to see change. People are tired, people are pissed, people want a change.
Yeah, I think, to me, and I said this the other day to a friend because we were having this conversation, and I was like, the thing that makes me so angry about these situations every time is, with any other occupation where people's lives are in your hands, a nurse, a doctor, even, not life or death, but like a financial manager or a lawyer, when there's a bad lawyer that's taking advantage of people, or a doctor with malpractice, you don't see all the doctors like, no, we stand with him and his lack of care for patients that killed 50 people. Nobody does that. They're on the opposite side. That's not us, that's him. And otherwise, there is a brotherhood, there is a family nature to these occupations where they do stick together and support each other in times of good. But when something goes wrong, when there's a bad apple, if you will, that apple's got to go. It's only in the police space that when a police officer does something that is clearly not right, there isn't an overwhelming reaction from other cops like, this is wrong, we condemn this. This is not how we police. This is not what we believe in. This is not how we do things. And that is what always bothers me, because it's like, you want the community to trust you. You want me and everyone else to believe that you're not like that, and I don't have to be afraid of you, and I don't have to have this animosity. Yet when someone does something that is clearly wrong, you have either nothing to say or you stand in solidarity with him. So, I mean, to use a legal term, like you're guilty by association, but you're choosing to associate with this person. And maybe you feel like you know his character or whatever reason, you've been through the fire, whatever excuse you want to use. That person made that decision. And because of that, someone's life is gone.
Right.
And we can see that it was the wrong decision. So that to me is what always triggers me in the situation. And to your point, Heller, I am seeing more. It's not enough. Like Donnie's right. There's still, I mean, even just what happened at the White House last night is just madness. But I am seeing slowly more and more cops make an effort to show, like, not necessarily that coming out and shouting that he was wrong and he should be convicted for murder and the other guys should be arrested, the other cops should be arrested. They are trying to de-escalate what situations start to flare up by showing, like, we're here to support your protests, not to antagonize. It's not enough. It needs to be more. And to my point, that's what bothers me about the situation as a whole when it comes to policing is you don't have to stand with somebody who makes the wrong decision. In fact, it would make colossal change between the community's relationship with police officers, in my opinion, if you were ready to stand up and say that's wrong.
Absolutely. How else are you going to earn someone's trust?
Yeah.
You don't earn someone's trust by standing with someone that you also know is wrong. I'm gonna tread carefully here because I know Donnie has family that are police, but I do also want to make a point about, you were saying what's different about the police from nurses and even someone who's taking care of your money and stuff. And like a lot of times, I think it's the fact that those people have advanced degrees. I don't think that we are getting the best and brightest people to become police officers. And I think you sort of see that in how, first of all, how people are handling situations where they're, even just how the LAPD is handling movement of people around. They're getting their own cars burned. Like it's their missteps and their over aggression that causes a lot of these things. So I'm not insulting all police officers, but there is just a certain amount of accountability that's not there because it's not demanded of them all the time. I think there's been too many opportunities for stuff, like you said, to be pushed under the rug. But, I really think that if there was more people coming from the military to the, that would be a better way to sort of, those people understand the value of a human life. Those people have, been through some real training. But a lot of times what we get now is like boys with big aggressive toys that they've used our tax dollars to pay for, people maybe smarter than them that are elected people that give them money, and they buy all this stuff, and then they have to demonstrate that it's necessary. And so a lot of times they're stacking the deck. There's the conspiracies out there about bricks being set. You see the cops going through and like destroying milk and stuff for people. So the militarization, I think, is a huge issue as well. And just, we used to describe police as our best and brightest, and I don't think they always are anymore. So it's some undertrained, poorly trained, scared, unequipped person that shouldn't be doing this, that's getting thrust into what is legitimately a dangerous, hard job, and just isn't equipped to deal with that sort of responsibility. So I think it's incumbent upon elected officials. Garcetti's trying to throw a bunch of money at the police right now, and that's not going over so well. So it's incumbent upon elected officials and people that are smarter and more responsible for human lives to make some of those decisions. So it's not so easy for cops to run about and behave however they want.
I think a lot of it is police who are policing communities that they're not from as well, like on top of that. And then that just makes it even worse because they're not even looking at the people that they're policing as equals or as humans because they don't have those
network.
Exactly. You don't have those background interactions with them. So it makes it a lot easier for somebody like George Floyd's murder to put his knee on his neck because he isn't looking at this guy as a man. He's like, these people they're hiring people who have like the most limited interactions with Black people and are coming into interactions with fear, and they're reacting like based off of fear, and then that's getting people killed.
I think, I mean, I have a family member who is a police officer and know other police officers also. I think it's a combination of points that both of you made, which is one, and this has always been my position on it, that if you are afraid of the community that you are supposed to be serving, you should not and absolutely cannot be given a gun and be sent in through that community. Because as you said, Heller, cops have an extremely dangerous job. That's why we treat them with the respect that we do, because we know they have to, most of the time, go into very stressful, unsafe scenarios all the time. That's why we call the police when we have a problem. They're coming to help what is usually a bad situation. So if you are afraid of the people that you have to work with every day, and you have a gun and you have the ability, essentially a license to kill, that is a bad situation. That cannot be the situation. The other part, to Donnie's point, is if you aren't from that community, why would you feel comfortable policing that community? You know, when you have a good cop that spent time in that community, that grew up in that community, that knows the businesses there, that knows the people who live there, there's a certain level of respect, and they feel a feeling of responsibility to keep people safe there and to listen and to solve situations without them escalating. The goal isn't to get everybody in jail. The goal is to get people out of jail, right? Not by breaking the law, but by creating situations that encourage like peace and understanding and growth, right? And those things are missing. But the biggest element to me is it's because I don't disagree with you that our military should have those jobs, but in the communities that they are from or they have an actual vested interest in. The militarization of police is why we're seeing the police reactions to protests now that is so inexplicable. You are not the military, in fact. You are not. You are policemen. Right. You are not to bulldoze over American citizens. You are not to spray pellets into crowds of people who are otherwise peacefully protesting. That is the idea that you feel comfortable doing that as a policeman, not as the army, not as an invading army in a foreign country. These are your neighbors that you're shooting at. You should not feel comfortable with that. You should not be so ingrained in the idea of what you are that you feel comfortable doing that.
Do you guys think that because it seems to me that if they had simply arrested the 4 officers responsible for George Floyd's death, like let's say the next day, that we'd be having a normal podcast right now talking about sports. Do you feel the same way?
I think there would still be protesting, even if they were brought in, because again, this has happened so many times, and I think it's just the way it happened. I don't think people will be okay with him resting his knee on someone's neck. So I think people will be protesting regardless. I do want to say too that now that I'm saying this, like, with the protesting, because I feel like a lot of it was peaceful. And I think if people are protesting, when I said earlier that a lot of times looting and rioting comes, I think that a lot of times with police antagonizing those people and shooting, wanting to shoot rubber bullets.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's hard to say. It really is.
I think we had Steven Jackson on, who was childhood friends with George Floyd.
Right.
We had him on The Herd earlier today. And it's really, on a side note, very encouraging to see almost all of the sports teams, owners, Mark Cuban out protesting, all of the athletes that have spoken up very, very vocally, unapologetically, gone to protests. But Steven Jackson said earlier that common sense isn't common. And that's as basic a level of, ideal as common sense is. It's very few and far between, it seems, these days. Because yes, you would assume people are screaming at you. You can see there are cameras everywhere. Mm-hmm. The audacity to be so entitled when that is happening that you can't be bothered to move your knee is inhumane and on a level that most people have not seen or experienced for themselves in their lifetimes in any capacity, despite the fact that we've said this happens. This is a reality in our community. Like, I've had scary interactions with the police before. I've had family members who've had terrifying interactions with the police before. And like, am I afraid of the police? Of course. Do I behave a certain way around the police? Of course. But I'm also aware that, like, I have to be that way, and I have to worry about my family, and I have to worry about my friends. Most people don't even know what that means. Like, they're like, what do you mean? Just do what the police say. They don't understand that like, in their mind, it's not even a concept that this could happen to someone. Mm-hmm. So they've never had a bad interaction with the police or authorities in any way. So for the longest time, they could not believe that this was something that could happen, let alone something that happens all the time. So I guess I say all that to say that I do feel like this is different. And just to, wrap all this up and put a bow on it, and all of you can, say what you think. But I feel like this is different. I feel like the social reaction from so many people around the world, protests in so many different countries, so many different cities that are not just Minneapolis, but with massive showings of thousands of people in different parts of those cities. I mean, LA has protests all over the city, New York. I think the fact that everyone is going through this very extremely stressful time with Corona, the fact that the evidence and the videos and the accounts, and Stephen Jackson having grown up with him and having such a voice as he already had, this is a different situation. I don't think anyone's going to forget this time. Our generation has been through a lot of different stuff. This feels different. The virus, the quarantine, the curfews, this feels like, okay, we've reached a fork in the road with everything that's going on with the divided country. This is an election year. It feels like it's time. Like, okay, people talk about it, go be about it now. And history's watching us right now, is how I feel. And you have to make a choice. And life is not black and white as far as like this way or that way. There's a gray area, whatever. No, this is a time in life. Like, we're going to look back on history one day. Your grandkids are going to ask you, what did you do? And this is, I guess, like how I want to wrap it up, because we didn't talk about the people who are, in that other section of white people who are standing with this like Trump situation. I don't even care about who you vote for, right? I don't care if you like Trump. I don't care. Like, do I care? Yes, of course. But I don't want to focus. I don't want to focus on that right now, because it's not about Trump. This happened before Trump, many years before Trump. This was going on. Trump did not create this. Is he responsible for the absolute chaos that we're dealing with right now because he's a terrible leader? Yes, he is responsible for that. He did not create police violence. He did not create social injustice. Does his rhetoric help it? Does it encourage it? Of course. But this existed for many, many years. So right now, what is happening? What's happening is history is splitting. And I don't want to be too deep and like theoretical about it, but you can go back in time. You can look at the civil rights movement and ask the people who picked the wrong side during that time how things went for them. Go back and look at these big moments in history when everyone was stressed out, when everyone was yelling, when everyone was protesting, when it felt like the world was burning. What side did you pick? You feel comfortable, 100% comfortable that you're right and you're making the right decision. It's between you and God, honestly. But you should think about what it is that you're doing.
And make sure you're making your own decision. I know something just from, growing up in a good neighborhood. There's a lot of people out there just saying what their parents told them to say. And I have some news for you. Just because your parents were rich doesn't mean they were right. So, try to have an open mind. Try to move with empathy. And I don't want to take the last word at all, but I just want to say thanks again for including me in the podcast. all of our friendships and this conversation.
We appreciate you, Heather.
Yeah.
I feel like it takes this kind of disruption to enact change. Like without this kind of protest, people aren't listening otherwise. So I feel hopeful despite how hard it is to feel hopeful in these times. You see these protesters, like we said earlier, are mixed. It's like the most diverse of crowds. It shows that not just Black people are upset about this. Americans, period, are upset. And I'm hopeful that we actually see some change, some real change. I know that it realistically is probably still a long time coming, but we are living history, like Joy just said. And I'm hopeful that what's happening right now is going to benefit my kids and my grandkids. And all I can really do is do my part and hope and pray.
Appreciate you.
I mean, Donnie, I thought you said it perfectly. I think that with everything that's happening now, with Joy, what you saying with it being an election year, it's like this is time you have to really vote local. Like this year, really, you have to make it count. It matters. You have to make sure you vote. And again, I've said it earlier that when we kneel or when we peacefully protest, it's just not the voice that leads us to action. It just isn't. So I think with everything that's happening, and people are aware and talking about it, everyone across the country, I do believe and I'm hopeful that things are better, and that it gets people talking more and it gets people stepping up. I've been seeing a lot of people posting on social media that a person that didn't look like them said like, "Hey, I appreciate you, I love you," or or just those little things just to kind of unite us. I think that's what we really need, having compassion and empathy. And I think that things will get better.
Well, thanks, guys. I know this was very emotional, but I thought it was a better way to handle everything that's going on. It was good to talk to all of you, even though we're still all in different places. It feels like this was like the closest to being back in the pod room that we've happened. So hope you guys are all safe, and I love all of you, and
love you back
in the podcast room soon. And this this all helps us move forward.